So I do have a short presentation that I want to do before we open up the floor to questions and discussion. Um, but before I go into that, I want to reiterate why this is really important. And I have been reading reports and articles that are so disturbing and so heartbreaking, but not surprising. And that's the saddest part of how domestic violence is increasing during COVID times. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I'll get into a little bit later. But it is a sad reality for so many of us. You know, right now we are being told to stay home as much as possible, stay home, stay safe, right? That's the hashtag that's going around. But for a lot of us, especially a lot of women, home is not the safest option. In fact, home is the most dangerous place that they can be. And I personally was once in that situation not too long ago where I was in an abusive marriage and I did not ever feel safe at home because I didn't know when he'll have another mood swing, when the other shoe will drop, when he'd be upset at something or pissed off at something, and he will take out his anger and frustration on me. And sometimes that anger and frustration was just words and hurtful comments, and other times it was physical bruises. But regardless, it was damaging to my soul, and it was damaging to my confidence, and damaging to just my self-esteem in general. And that is the sad reality for many, many women right now who are trapped, who are not getting any kind of reprieve from their abusers because it is so isolating. And right now they don't have anywhere to go. They don't have anyone to turn to. And the traditional support systems that may have been there in normal times are not available anymore because of coronavirus and because of the situation and isolation and social distancing that's happening. So it's really important for all of us to come together, to raise awareness, and to talk about these issues, because that is the first step to change. And the more we are able to speak up, the more we're able to share resources and learn how, first of all, we can recognize abuse in our lives, and then also learn how we can recognize abuse among the women that are around us. And they may be in our families, they may be in our workplaces, they may be in our communities. And right now they're invisible because we're not able to see them in person. But there are little things we can do, and we can all explore those ideas. And one of the things that that's one of the reasons I launched this a connection circle, especially dedicated to domestic violence during the COVID times. And so we can all brainstorm some creative ideas of support, highlight some of the things we're doing, and I will be sharing those on a broader level as well with the community and with folks everywhere through some videos that I'm doing and blogs that I'm writing, etc. So hopefully we can get a bit of a conversation and dialogue going, and spread the word, bring other people in, and I'm sure as more and more topics come forward and as we create momentum, the group will grow and it will become an organic community group. Because the last thing we want is for women who are trapped right now in those situations to feel so alone and so isolated that they feel that there is no way out, and this is all they deserve, and that's the best they can get. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, as we see, it does end up in lives being either lost or ruined, or just affecting them as a whole for all their entire life going forward. So that is my biggest fear, and that absolutely breaks my heart because I've been there. I know what it feels like, and the last thing we want is for these women to feel like they have no hope. There is always hope, there's always a way, and we will work together to find that way. So with that, I'm going to jump into a little bit of a debrief of why we need to have these conversations. And I'm going to just share a presentation that I created. I've prepared a short presentation to talk about domestic violence connection circles, why I started these, and why it is so important to talk about these during this time, supporting victims during COVID-19. Like I said, there are too many of us that are not feeling safe at home. And home is, in fact, the most dangerous place women can be who are suffering from abuse and domestic violence. And domestic violence is on the rise. And we're going to dig in a little bit to why it is rising during COVID-19 and what are some of the reasons so that we can start breaking them down and thinking of ways that we can mitigate. the risks. So first of all, isolation. Isolation is an abuser's best friend, because the way abusers are able to control their victims is by isolating them from their friends and family, from the support systems, from people that are in their lives and they care about them. And what this does, and they do it, through a lot of in the beginning, it's all masked in love. Oh, I don't want you to go out and talk to your friends. I don't want you to talk to other people. I don't want you to lean on other people. I want you all to myself. And oftentimes then victims believe that, oh my gosh, he loves me so much and he just wants me all to himself. And this is the man of my dreams. And slowly but surely, the victim starts to cut herself off from her friends and family. She starts to see them less. She starts to feel more and more isolated, and the walls just close in, and it becomes much, much, much easier for the abuser to control the victim. So isolation is really the main tool abusers use. And right now, because of COVID-19, the isolation is being handed to them on a silver platter, because you are not allowed to see your friends and family as a victim. You are not allowed to go and lean on other people. You are not allowed to have physical contact. A lot of these women who are in some cases, they don't even have access to the internet. They don't have access to other resources, and they don't have access to money. So, and couple that with all the isolation that's already happening, because that is mandated by law now, it becomes a recipe for disaster, and the abuser has a much easier time to control their victims, because they can say, well, you're not allowed to go to the grocery store. Now you can't even just go and drop off your kid to the school because schools are out, so you're not able to meet other parents and other moms you may have met or had some contact with. So the more you feel isolated, and the more the walls close in, the more you feel like this is the only way and there's no other way out. And it's much easier then for the abusers to control the victim. So that is the main cause why domestic violence is on the rise. Secondly, financial stress and crisis always escalates abuse. Even during my marriage, the times of crisis, the times when he was laid off, the times when he lost his job, the times when he had some health issues or other crises, are always the times when abuse escalated. And that is because inadvertently abuse comes from a place of insecurity. And when the abuser feels feels that insecurity from other aspects of his life as well. So, for example, he's just lost his job, so he's not feeling secure financially. He's just not able to hang out with his friends, so he's not feeling secure socially. And but the difference with an abuser and a non-abuser is that a non-abuser may also feel those insecurities, but will be able to deal with them in a healthy way, whereas an abuser will look for ways to exert control on a weaker person, quote unquote, the victim, and feel more powerful about himself and feel better about himself. So in this case, the victim essentially becomes the punching bag for the abuser, where the abuser is like, I'm really stressed out financially. I don't know what to do. I'm really frustrated. I need to take it out. And who will he take it out on? His victim. And that is why always that in times of crisis, in times of difficulties, abuse almost always escalates. And I can speak to that from personal example, that whenever there were times of crisis, the abuse intensified. In fact, the times when the abuse went from emotional to physical in my marriage were always times of crisis. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3 is that it's much easier for abusers now to control their victims financially. So, it's much easier for an abuser to say, well, I've just lost my job. We don't have a lot of money. So I can't really give you any money or any allowance or any other kind of financial control. So abusers can really use this COVID crisis as a justification for controlling the purse strings even more, and taking away whatever financial power the victim may have had. So that could even be, let's say if the victim lost her job, the abuser will be like, well, now it's just my income, so I'm going to run the shots, right? I'm going to call the shots on this, and I'm going to run the show on this. So it is much easier now for the abuser to justify the financial abuse because of the financial crisis and uncertainty that COVID is causing. Number 4, because of social distancing, there is no reprieve that the victim gets. And there's 2 reasons to that. First of all, the victim is not able to go out anywhere because she is trapped, she is isolated, she cannot go and see friends and family, she cannot talk to neighbors, she cannot talk to anybody outside of whatever whoever is living with her, which is essentially a lot of times just the abuser. So there is no reprieve for the victim from that angle, and she may have either lost her job or not going to work or just working from home. There's no way or no outlet of creating connections and seeing other people outside of this. And then on the flip side, the abuser is not going anywhere either, because he's either lost his job or working from home, or even if there is a job, but there's other maybe he's sick, maybe he's just not feeling well and he's already feeling anxious and insecure, so he's not going out either. So now both of them are stuck together in isolation and with an abuser being ultra frustrated because of what's happening, which then makes the victim even more vulnerable and an even more powerless position. And she's not getting any reprieve. So now whatever outlet she may have gotten by going out and talking to a friend or going to work and feeling, more confident there, she's not feeling that confidence. And, especially if she's lost her job or lost income, then that confidence even goes down, and it becomes much easier for the abuser to exert more control over the victim. And then number 5, the support systems right now are at overcapacity. So let's say if you have a shelter with 15 beds and all of them are full, 15 rooms and all of them are full. And generally, when shelters are already over capacity, and they're able to have a waiting list, or they're able to squeeze 1 or 2 extra people in there. But now that's not the case because of social distancing. You cannot go over capacity. You cannot just throw in some extra beds. The support systems are already tapped out. There is no in-person counseling. There's stricter social distancing, because if one woman gets sick in a shelter, everybody else will, and that's just absolutely disastrous. So there's more protocols in place, there are more isolation in place, more rigid rules in place, which means that more and more women are being turned away from shelters. Just yesterday, somebody reached out to me on Twitter and told me that she has called, about over a dozen shelters all over the GTA, and none of them have space, and she just doesn't know what to do. And it broke my heart, and I referred her to some other resources that she could call and maybe hopefully get something. But and I'm going to keep following up with her, because she just says, I don't have anywhere to go. Like, where do I go? I can't just go and sleep on the street. I can't go to a friend's house because of social distancing. I can't lean on my traditional support system. I can't go to my cousins or my families, and no shelter has space. So where do I go? So and it's not like affordable housing comes by very quickly, especially if you're already suffering from financial crisis or you've lost your job or income. So because support systems are now over capacity, it becomes much harder to leave. And also you can't get counseling services and things like that because most of them are closed. So it takes a while for those services to be turned to virtual. And there's a big lag there, and a lot of women are falling through the cracks, and they're just not getting the support that they need. So that's also a big reason. But like I always say, that we have problems and we can create solutions. And they're not going to happen overnight. We're going to have to think a little bit outside of the box, in fact, a lot outside of the box. And we're going to have to think of ways we can creatively support women with the tools that we have, whatever we can control. And that's one of the reasons I've launched this group, is to be able to provide a little bit of support, a little bit of awareness, and hopefully grow the group, that at least women feel that, yes, I'm not alone, and there are people out there who care about me. And it might encourage her to take that next step, or at least look for resources and prepare herself for the next steps. So some of the ways that we can support. Number 1 is always awareness and education. I always say, this is my favorite line, knowledge is power. And when I was in my marriage, the very first time that I even heard the word abuse or learned what was happening to me was abuse was after 10 years of marriage. After 10 years of being in that situation, I started university and I stumbled upon the Health and Counseling Center, and there was a sign there which spoke to me. It had a bunch of questions on it. Do you feel intimidated, like you've lost your voice, like you can't go on, like you're living in fear, you're walking on eggshells? And I answered yes, yes, yes to all of those questions. and it said, come in and make an appointment. We're here to talk. And that is the first time that I learned what was happening to me was actually abuse, and it was not okay, and I did deserve better. So eventually, as I started going for more and more counseling and learning what was happening to me was wrong, and I did have rights as a woman, as a human being, as a Canadian, that is eventually what gave me the power to be able to leave. So awareness and education is always, always key. But right now, we don't have those traditional methods of getting awareness and education because of COVID-19 and the crisis and a lot of places being closed down. So what are ways that we can create awareness and education? What are ways that we can create that knowledge and give women their power? And it is by community supports, it's by creative solutions, it's by things like these, whether it's webinars, whether it's just picking up the phone and calling someone who's in your community and you think that they're affected by domestic abuse. And just giving women more and more tools and resources to build that muscle, because leaving is not a one-time thing. Leaving is not a static thing, like, oh, okay, she's, one day you're in it and the next day you left. Leaving is a process, and it's a very long process of gathering knowledge, gathering evidence, gathering resources, building a support system, and to mitigate that fear of uncertainty and anxiety and ambiguity, which holds a lot of women trapped. And the more knowledge you have, the more empowered you feel. So our job as a community, as individuals, is really to create that knowledge, to create that support system, so more and more women can feel that, yes, there are people out there who care, and I do have hope. I don't have to stay here and tolerate this just because that's the only way. So that's the goal of these circles. And I, wanted to give this little bit of a brief overview on why this is important before we jump into some conversations. And before we get into that, there are I'm also going to be doing these every week. It will be every Monday at 8 p.m. And some of the future topics coming up are next week, I'm going to be talking about emotional and psychological abuse and what that looks like and how it progresses, because abuse never starts with a slap or a kick. Then the following week, I'm going to be looking at family law and domestic violence. And in fact, I'll bring in as a guest a family lawyer who's going to be able to shed some light on what are the intersection between family law and domestic violence, and what are some of the basic things that we can all benefit from knowing, because a lot of women don't even know their rights. I didn't even know what child support is, and if there is something called child support. Some legal aid myths. So we'll bring in someone from legal aid to be able to talk about how to access legal aid, and what do you do if you run into a situation where it's not working out with your lawyer or other stuff. And one of my favorite topics is the impact on children, because a lot of women think that the kids it's not really affecting them. The kids are just witnessing it. But I know from personal experience, kids don't just witness abuse, they experience it like it's happening to them. And it can be absolutely detrimental on children's mental health. So we're going to talk about that. And there's a lot of other topics coming up. So we can, as we brainstorm and talk, we can think of different topics. And I'm always looking for ideas and feedback to make sure that we keep improving, keep learning, and keep sharing together. So with that, I'm going to stop the screen share so we can jump into some conversations and share some thoughts and ideas. So I see, Messi, your hand is up. So I'm going to open up I'm going to allow you to talk. So feel free to share some of your thoughts. Can you speak up so maybe you can hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, hi, thank you. Hi, Shelly, are you there, right? She's not right, so.
Go ahead. What's your question?
Okay, so my question is actually, what I have seen is like, due to this COVID crisis, most of the women, I try to, reach them right now in many ways because of, my work and, my, passion as well. So what I've seen is a lot of people are there struggling with their mental health. That makes me, worried at this point. I know the isolation by itself, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Staying in that like small box, I would say, it's really, really very hard. And then We really need to talk and then also share about, on how to manage themselves. It's very, very important even to talk about self-care,
Mm-hmm.
which is the most important part, I have seen. So even it's very sad this morning what happened when I opened my email. A lady, she emailed me to get the service. She never been in abusive relationship. She stayed in her marriage like for 9 years. But with this COVID crisis, it changed her life, ups and down. And then her husband, he became very, very abusive for the last 3 weeks. And even she didn't know about the term abuse and kind of thing, but she heard about this some stories in online, and then she tried to reach me. And what she said is, it's really, really break my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So he disconnect all the internet because he cannot pay. He was the one who paid. And also even her phone line is even like it's disconnected because of the bill, and she has a right to talk to her family at this point or through his phone. So this woman, even she cannot access a webinar like that. And she's not like, because we have to be on social media, or we have to be connected to learn, and even to create our community. But this woman, she really, really didn't like try to reach out a lot of people. But unfortunately, she know my email, and she messaged me, somebody saying, anyways, there is a lot of things. So I couldn't try to reach her because she don't have any internet access. So I was so worried because there may be a lot of women, even they have been in this situation. But what I have seen, there is a lot of women before the COVID, they may be educated about what violence is, what domestic violence and what the abuse is. And those women definitely, they have the knowledge. They can call like 211 in my city, or they can use our toll-free number and they can access. But there are also a lot of women, they really, really stacked. And plus the mental health is one of the most important thing. I don't know how we reach those women, because which is also one of the most important thing we have to talk. Yeah. And the other thing is like, even for women of color, we have a plan to organize some webinar in my city. I invited few people. Maybe we'll ask you also for some help. And then there is a Black Mental Health Federation here in my city. So we try to, because at least we have to do something in my community, which is very, very important. And also it's good to come, as a woman, share your story and then also learn each other. And because there's also parenting issues, and also there's a lot of women, they struggle with custody fight in between because of the COVID crisis. If you hear, I don't know, 2 weeks ago there was an issue. I think some family members, they had an issue. It was on TV, kind of like the other parent is not aligned because she's a frontline worker and kind of thing. And also I know a lot of women, they work in the grocery store. They moved out from the shelter, but even they don't have any like support at this point, even on how to manage, on how to take care of, and also on how to manage those narcissistic people in your life with this COVID crisis. And it's really, really a huge issue at this point. And I'm very happy at least you just created this platform for us to speak as advocate, and hopefully we'll have a lot of takeoff message at the end. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Messi. Thanks so much for your thoughts, and thank you for being such an active participant all the time in the sessions. So I'll tackle this one by one. So one of the things you first raised was the emotional and psychological and mental effect of abuse, and absolutely that is the main reason why a lot of women continue to stay, because it's not like it's not like you're chained to a bed, or to a like chained up, or physically restrained from leaving, but it's the mental prison. It's like, okay, if I leave, then what? Where do I go? Who do I turn to? I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I don't have a job. I don't have a support system. And there's so much fear of uncertainty and what that new life is going to look like. And society already teaches us that the devil known is better than the devil unknown. You should stay and make it work, and that's a woman's job. So when you're staying in that situation and you're feeling completely hopeless, and your confidence is at a low, because that's what abuse does to you. It chips away at your self-esteem, and you just feel you're not good enough, you're not capable enough, you're not smart enough, you're not intelligent enough to figure things out. That's what an abuser tells you. Even during my marriage, whenever my husband would abuse me, and I would ask him, why are you saying these things to me, and these horrible things, and calling me all these bad names, he would say, because you deserve it. And I heard that so much on a daily basis that I started to believe that I really started to believe there is something inherently wrong with me, and I do not deserve to be loved or respected or treated with kindness. And when you believe that, when the person who supposedly loves you and tells you that he loves you is treating you that way, then you think, well, if somebody who loves me is saying this, then it must be true. And then you start believing that about yourself. So you think no one else will want to talk to you either. No one else will treat you with kindness either. And that's exactly what abusers want you to believe. So you stay, and your confidence keeps eroding, your self-esteem keeps eroding, and you basically become a hollow shell of yourself. So and then even after you leave, it's not like you leave and things are back to normal. Like the trauma lasts forever, because you're never able to move on from trauma. You move on with it. And no matter how many years it's been, no matter how long it's been, there will be sometimes triggers. And right now, like today, I was doing an interview with Huffington Post, and one of the questions the reporter asked me was that, what about for survivors? Like, we're talking about victims here. Victims absolutely is very important because they're in crisis. But even for survivors, like times of crisis will trigger memories of isolation, of being told not to go anywhere. I mean, even for me, yesterday I was just cooking in my kitchen, and this idea of that I can't actually just go out and see friends. It reminded me of the time in my marriage when I wasn't able to go out and see friends. And then I had to just calm myself down, remind myself, no, it's a completely different situation. This is for safety purposes. And that was because I wasn't allowed to because of an abuser. So, but the feelings come up, and that's out of your control. So you need to learn strategies and tools on how to manage your emotional and mental well-being during those times. And when you're a victim, it's much harder because you're in that situation. And the first step is to be kind to yourself, is to be non-judgmental towards yourself, because like I said, leaving is not linear, and leaving is not a one-time thing. On average, a woman would leave 7 times before she's finally able to leave. And every time you leave and go back, or you're sent back, you're one step closer to finally leaving. And you need to congratulate yourself on that. You need to applaud yourself on that. Don't be hard on yourself, like, oh shit, maybe I just don't have it in me. Maybe I can't leave. Maybe I'm just not good enough, or strong enough, or intelligent enough, or smart enough. You are enough. The fact that you're fighting, the fact you're even thinking about it, the fact you're even trying, that's commendable, and that's worth celebrating and worth applauding yourself for. So be kind to yourself in the process, and know that each step that you're taking is one step closer. And that the same goes for the people around you who are supporting you. So if you have, all of you have anyone in your family or in your surroundings who you think is affected by domestic abuse, and you're like, don't, be absolutely non-judgmental in your support for them, because they are probably themselves feeling like, maybe I just can't leave, maybe it's not in me. So our job as supporters, as caregivers, as friends, is to be very non-judgmental in our support. That, what, it's okay if you went back, it's fine, we'll figure this out, we'll move forward. So because the key to leaving is not that you just leave and you're okay and you're out, it's that you will fall, you will fail, it's inevitable, but you will get back up. And the key is to get back up and try one more time. I tried to leave my marriage 5 times, and I was either sent back or went back. The final time that I did not go back and I was able to build a new life going forward was because I tried that one more time. And I had that community at that time. And I had people who lifted me up and who were able to hold my hand and tell me that I'm not alone. So that's really absolutely essential. And it never starts with a slap or a kick. Abuse is always escalates. It always starts with emotional and psychological abuse. I'm going to talk at length about that in the next session, but that's why the mental health effect of it is extremely strong. The next question that you asked, Messi, you raised the point of women of color, and thank you for raising that, because it's so important. And I always say that, abuse, violence against women, mental health, all of these are very, very universal issues. Sadly, women from all walks of life, all kind of backgrounds, all socioeconomic statuses fall victim to domestic violence. However, the experience of it, the barriers that they face to leaving, the shame and stigma associated with leaving and speaking up, these things are highly intersectional with culture, race, religion, upbringing, where you came from, what your cultural values were, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a generational cycle to abuse too, because kids who grow up watching and witnessing abuse in their families, they normalize it and then it perpetuates. So a lot of times women who have seen abuse in their families, like I did, my father was abusive to my mom. So now when I was in my marriage, for me, it was pretty normal that that's the way it's supposed to be. I didn't know any better. I hadn't seen healthy relationships in my life. So it all plays a huge factor. So I mentor a lot of survivors. And one time, one of my mentees said, you know, when a white woman leaves an abusive marriage, more often than not, she will find some support. She will find resources. If she's grown up here in Canada, she will have some awareness of her rights and her freedoms. But an immigrant woman or a woman of color who's come here and who doesn't have any idea about her rights, and or who's coming from a background where patriarchy is very, very normalized, if she leaves, she's faced with ridicule and oppression and judgment and just shame and stigma, which is debilitating. I think that was, even in my experience, that was the most shocking and most crippling part of my experience. Was not the after I left. It was, yes, of course, financially I was struggling and I was working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and all of those practical things were there, but I was managing those. The hardest thing for me to manage and deal with was the shame and stigma that was inflicted upon me, because I was now a shameless woman, a homewrecker, an unfaithful wife, a bad mother leading her daughters on a path to hell. And when it comes from your family and people that you trust and you've known forever, it can be absolutely crippling. And a lot of times women keep going back because of that shame and stigma, because they feel like, I don't want to be a source of shame to my family forever. So my second TED talk, in fact, that I did was titled The Culture of Honor, and I go into depth about some of these topics in that. But the key is to build intersectionality and that cultural awareness into our support systems. And that's why organic groups like these are so important, because we're able to bring in perspectives from different cultural backgrounds into the mix and make sure that support systems are created that are culturally sensitive, that are appropriate, that are that are encompassing enough that no women are falling through the cracks because they don't feel supported or understood or represented. That's why it's so important not to have a one-size-fits-all approach, and be sensitive to what some of those unique barriers are. While there are obviously big universalities to this, and domestic violence is a universal issue, there are a lot of intersectionalities as well that need to be addressed, and make sure that cultural competency is built into our support systems. Did I cover everything you said, Messi? If you can type in the chat box if there was anything else you wanted me to cover. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go to HT now, and I'm going to allow you to talk. Can you say something so we can make sure we can hear you?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Samra. First of all, thank you for this initiative that you have, that you're leading. Thank you, because you have become inspirational. As I mentioned to you, I guess that back in 3.5 years, you were the person who allowed me to bring awareness to my attention. Yes, agree, it builds up over the years, but it was your story that propelled me to take action and move forward my case.
Oh,
so I want to bring that
I'm
to
so proud of you. I just want to say I'm so proud of you.
yeah, it has been quite a journey. Not that it's over, because it's always a journey, but I want to just kind of share the point of awareness, right? uh, Having awareness is very complex, because when you are immersed in the abuse, it's like a spiral. You always go in a spiral up and down. It's a roller coaster. You don't have a stability, and it's very hard for a victim to be able to make decisions when you go up and down and very fast. It's like a train that never stops, and your emotions are tackled. It's like you're dismembered every single time of the process. So it's hard for you to know, okay, is this good? Is this bad? Am I right? Am I not? So again, everything related to awareness, what you were saying, I think is crucial in understanding, number one, what's happening to you. And to be able to zoom out when you're in the abuse is very, if not extremely hard to do.
Very hard, yeah.
You're
getting conflicting messages from everywhere.
Yeah. Exactly. Your dashboard is alarm system is on. You don't know what to do. The only thing you know is that it hurts.
Yeah.
So being a survivor, just like many of you are tonight, I want to make sure that the people that are hearing our stories understand that we all been there. We all have been there. That the only thing you need to know is just to hear that voice that is inside of you.
Yeah.
That is just don't put it down. Don't lower the volume. Just allow yourself to really hear it out. And then you'll know just right inside of you if it's wrong or if it's not. And then you'll move accordingly.
Yeah.
I know that in my case, precisely, I had a lot of shame. You mentioned stigma. Because I thought, how could an individual that's supposed to be intellectual or study or whatever is not able to stop it? And that really brought a lot of the fights inside of me. It was, I was condemned even before I step out.
Mhm.
I condemn myself. I disarm myself before I was even able to prove to me that I was capable. So I guess that what you're saying again, based on the awareness, is yes, how to become not judgmental. I can't recall because back then it was different. It was hard to not be judgmental because all the voices that were pointing that you were whatever except you.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Samra, if you do have a find within your story, in your journey, a type of checklist in which people can really check in very briefly or very in a very pragmatical way what is right, just to feel the water, the thermometer when you're there.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. That's such an important point. Um, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of self-validation. And what you just raised is that feeling that you get when you are in a situation where the voice inside your head, that little voice that says this doesn't feel right, this is not supposed to be the way it is, there's something wrong here, there's something off, this doesn't feel okay, am I really that bad, am I really supposed to be treated this way because I'm a woman, or because I'm not good enough or whatever enough, right? And then your abuser or others around you or his supporters are telling you that it's not that bad. You're all right. Like, so, one of the things that happened in my marriage was that we were living in a joint family. So it wasn't just my husband, ex-husband, it was also his parents, and a lot of his family would always visit. And I would always be told that I should be grateful that I've got such a loving husband because, he doesn't break my bones. He doesn't slap me around. He gets angry once in a while and calls me bad words and stuff, but that's all right. That's not really hurting. Or the few times that he did hit me, it's not like it wasn't really hitting, like he was breaking my bones or me landing in the hospital. So I should be grateful, and he's not cheating on me. So when everybody around you tells you that, and I was in that situation, everyone around me, including my own mom, was telling me that I should learn what ticks him off and try to avoid doing that, and then it'll all be okay. So as if it was simple. And I was like, why can't I find whatever that switch is? Like, because something I'm doing this week is something that it actually pleases him, and the same thing next week pisses him off. So like, what am I doing that is so bad? What am I doing that is just so off? Like, am I just dumb? Do I just not get it? And in that time, there was always this voice in my head that would come up and say, you know what, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't seem okay. Why do I deserve this? Why do I, why am I worthy of being treated this way and not better? And but when everybody around you is telling you that this is what's right for you, and your job as a woman is to stay and make it work, and that everybody doesn't just have to be family members, it could just be even society, it could be our cultural and emotional conditioning from a young age, and it just could be like other people, or even our own fears that are telling us that maybe I'm wrong, and I'm just feeling this way. It's really important in that moment to look very deep within yourself and validate yourself and understand that what I'm feeling is valid, what I'm feeling is normal. yes, I do have the right to be respected. I do have the right to feel this way. I do have the right to demand better. Um, just because he's not physically assaulting me doesn't mean that it's not abusive. Just because he's not, forcing me to stay at home doesn't mean that he's not treating me, the right way. So there's so much more to abuse than just physical. Like physical abuse is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much underneath it that leads to that. And sometimes the physical abuse never even comes, but that doesn't mean the relationship is not abusive, because emotional and psychological abuse can have the same kind of impact on you, if not even more damaging. Um, and in that moment, it's really important to validate yourself and know that what you're feeling is right. If you're feeling bad about yourself with someone, that person is not right for you. If you're feeling off, that feeling is valid. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you and you're crazy and you're paranoid and you're imagining things and you're too sensitive or whatever that person is saying. You have the right to feel the way you feel. And then on top of that, apart from validating yourself, look for others who validate you as well. There are tons of articles online. There are tons of resources. If you just like look up, signs of emotional abuse, signs of psychological abuse, like, read up on these topics. Like I said, knowledge is power. The more you equip yourself with the right tools and the education and the knowledge, the more easier it will be for you to validate how you feel and to demand better and to be, in a stronger position to demand respect. And there's a lot of other help out there as well. For me, during my marriage, Assaulted Women's Helpline was on my speed dial one. And every time I would have that weak moment when I'm feeling filled with self-doubt, or maybe I'm doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, maybe I should go back, maybe I shouldn't leave at all, maybe, I'm just feeling off because I'm crazy or whatever, I would call Assaulted Women's Helpline and I would talk to a counselor, and they're all anonymous. They're there and you can talk for as long as you want. And I would sometimes be on the phone with someone for an hour or two until I felt better. And I would talk. And as I would hear myself talk, I would know that, okay, yes, what I'm feeling is valid. And when that person will validate me, it's like, yes, absolutely, these are signs of abusive behavior. Absolutely, this isn't right. You do deserve better. There are resources out there. There is a big, beautiful world out there that is going to embrace you. And yes, there's always going to be bad people, but there's far more good in this world than there is bad. So keep that hope alive. And when you are hearing that from someone, and even when you hear yourself talk, it becomes much easier for you to believe in yourself and to validate yourself. So I'm a big believer in therapy and in reaching out for support. I still go to therapy. I have no shame in saying that. And I think I always will, because it's the it's the check-in that you need for your mental health. Just because, just how you go to a doctor for your regular physical checkups, this is like a mental checkup. And your brain is the most important organ in your body. I mean, not that the others aren't important, but you know what I mean. Like your brain is basically your your thinking power and everything. And you got to take care of it. You got to take care of your emotional and mental health, because if that goes, then life becomes pretty miserable. So make sure you validate yourself and make sure you look for the places and resources and the supports that will validate you as well. And one of the things that worked for me was also realizing that feelings are all temporary. And if I'm feeling this way right now, doesn't mean that I will feel this way always. So think of a feeling as a wave. And I used to think, I still do, like when I'm feeling anxious, like I said, yesterday I was having a bit of a moment, and even this morning I was feeling a little bit anxious. So I think of those feelings as waves, like, they just kind of go through you and you let it go through you. And sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it goes away in 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 5 days, sometimes it takes a week, and that's okay. It's just a giant wave. And once that wave passes, you're back to calmer waters. So think of feelings as waves, and always disassociate feeling and action. So yes, I'm feeling this way, but doesn't mean that it has to translate into action. And this is a trick that I learned when I left my marriage. And there were times in the beginning when I used to miss him. And it wasn't that I was missing him, I was missing having someone in my life. I was missing the good times, because of any but even if it's a super abusive relationship, there will always be good times, because that's how the abuser controls, and the hot and cold and all of that, which makes the woman feel absolutely trapped in it. So I used to miss that. I used to miss, you know, the certainty, the just having a partner, and, you know, dealing with raising two kids alone and going to school, and all of that was extremely hard. So I would have weak moments, and I would just tell myself, okay, this is a wave, Samra, it's going to leave, it's going to go through you, and it's going to go away. And then realizing that, yes, I feel this way. So validating myself, yes, I feel this way. And it doesn't mean that I have to act upon it. So yes, I feel like I miss him. It automatically mean that I need to go back to him. And so disassociating feeling from action is a really powerful tool. So it allows you to validate how you feel, so you don't feel ashamed of yourself, and be kind to yourself in that process. Yes, it's natural to feel this way. If I wasn't missing him, if I wasn't feeling this way, that would be a problem for worry. Like, you know, that would be something unnatural, but it's absolutely human. And you having those weak moments is nothing wrong. It's a very human experience. So yes, it allows you to validate yourself from a feeling standpoint, and then also realize but the choice to act on that feeling is mine, and I have the power to choose it or not. So you've automatically gone from feeling helpless and powerless, oh shit, I'm feeling this way, I gotta go back, to feeling, yes, I'm feeling this way, and I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm going to choose not to act on it. So automatically in your brain, you go from feeling powerless to feeling powerful, and a weak moment can be switched to an empowering moment. And that's a neat trick that I often use. And talk to yourself kindly. When you have that negative dialogue running in your head in those weak moments, think about how you would talk to a friend if your friend was feeling this way. Would you ever say, oh, you're too weak, you're not strong enough, you can't do this? No, you wouldn't. You would say to a friend, I love you, I'm here for you, don't worry, it's okay to feel this way, you're human, and we're going to figure it out. Talk to yourself the same way. I still stand in front of a mirror and give myself pep talks. That's my trick. And my kids think I'm absolutely crazy, but I do it and it works for me. And so do things like that, whatever works for you. Taking a walk in the nature, like nature is very healing, or whatever it is you do to take care of yourself. Do not blame yourself. Do not be hard on yourself for feeling weak. Strength, courage, and confidence is not the absence of weak moments or fear or self-doubt. It is feeling afraid, feeling weak, feeling self-doubt, but also then rising up and choosing to move forward anyway. So we are all humans, and the more we validate ourselves and the more we are kind to ourselves, the easier it will be for us to act from a place of courage. So I hope that helps. Did I cover everything that you were asking? Just type in the chat box before I move on to Kirti. Okay, great. Thanks. All right, Kirti, go. Can you say something so we can hear you? I think you need to unmute yourself, Kirti. Kirti, just unmute yourself. Now let me do it. Hello? Can you hear us? Okay, maybe I'll come back. I'll come back to Kirti then. There's some new folks that joined in too. All right, Messi, I'm gonna, oh, actually before that, there's a question in the chat box. Can you talk about safety planning? Yes, so safety planning, I can speak to it a little bit, and I will definitely have in a future session somebody from a shelter to talk more at detail about safety planning. But the one thing that I will say in terms of any kind of safety planning or what you're going to do afterwards, etc., is, again, I keep coming back to knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you're aware of, the stronger you feel, because you're able to mitigate some of that fear of the unknown. Like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Who am I going to turn to? So in my case, how I did my safety planning was, because I was a student at U of T, I was able to go to the financial aid counselor there and ask about whether I'll get OSAP, how will I cover my finance finances, how can I apply for Ontario Works, et cetera, et cetera. So I was on welfare for a few months before I got my OSAP kicking in. So that was the financial piece that I had to figure out. And then there was the safety piece, which because I eventually did report him and he was arrested, there was an automatic restraining order put in place. And then when I was living on campus, I did ask the campus police to do rounds of the complex that I lived in with my children to make sure that I just felt safer that way. I did not feel at that point an imminent danger of him trying to harm me because of the restraining order and because of the fact that there were charges in place. I knew that he wouldn't be stupid enough to do that. So I didn't have to go to extreme lengths on that. As far as the campus police did some patrols and I had a restraining order in place, I did feel safe. However, definitely that's not the case everywhere. And there are tons and tons of cases where women are afraid that, no matter what you put in place, no matter, whether there's a restraining order or not, that person's going to find me and they're going to harm me. And in that moment, it's very important to do safety planning with a professional expert in that. And sometimes that means going to a shelter, because shelters' addresses are not listed publicly and they're not allowed to disclose your whereabouts. So much lesser chance of an abuser finding you. And also there are much bigger safety protocols put in place, such as there's many more security layers to go through, and it's not like somebody can just walk into a shelter. You'll have to first call in, make an appointment, and go through a bunch of screenings before you're allowed to visit. So it's they have a lot of stuff in place, and Assaulted Women's Helpline, like I said, is a great resource, and they actually have experts available on the phone that can help you with your safety planning. So I hope that helps, but I will definitely do a session dedicated to safety planning in the future and bring in experts to be able to talk about it a little bit more. We're going to try you again, Kirti, and see if we can get you to say something, and maybe he can hear. So it's still showing.
Hello.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Hi, yay.
Sorry, there was something going on with my phone. Actually, I'm cleaning my phone again and again with wet wipes. I think that's messed up my screen.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay, so Samra, I just wanted to just tell my story.
Yeah.
I have been raised in an abusive household, in a sense that my father has been an abuser, and he still is. So I know, like, my mom, like, my parents are in India, so the things are different there, like, if we talk about in comparison to Canada. But, when we talk about, like, oh, somebody's not able to leave because they are not financially stable. But my mom was a teacher, and she has been working before her marriage, and she was a government teacher, and she had, she was financially able to, if you like, you want to stay, to support her and her kids and all that.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think when we talk about the friends and family as a support system, sometimes they are not. For example, I'll quote my grandmom, because my grandmom had, like, I have 3 aunts, so they're all younger to my mom. And so my mom told me that in the beginning, when it all started, and I was 2 years old maybe, so she wanted to leave because she was already working and whatever. And my grandmom said that, oh, if you get a divorce, that your other sisters won't be able to find good matches, and they won't be able to get married in a good household,
Yeah, I was the eldest of 4 sisters, and I heard that all the time, that no one would marry my sisters because I would be a divorcee.
Yeah. So, and when I talk about myself, that it's my mind, it's always been confusing, He's my dad. I do love him. And on my half of my brain, then I think of things he has done to us, because I've seen my mom beaten up. I've seen he used to, you know, when we went out to get some groceries or something, and he would just shut the door and won't let us in.
Yeah.
And sometimes that was like uh, at night time, and we would end up going in at neighbors' places or things like that.
Yeah.
So I have even gone to therapy about it, and I'm a little better from. I can deal with my emotions a little better than I used to before that, before going into therapy.
Yeah.
But still, it's so confusing for me. One day, I mean, like, I really love him. I'm especially, I'm worried about him all the time, especially so the thing is going on, and I tell my mom, like, don't like tell him to stay at home, don't go out for walks and stuff like that. And sometimes at the same time, I think about the things like, you know, we have gone through, me and my brother have gone through because of all this abuse happening.
Yeah.
So even now, it's like um, he's not physically doing any harm to my mom, but sometimes he just gets pissed off for a little thing, and he would just start saying some bad words,
Yeah.
all the abuses to and all those things. And right, so I mean, and the thing would like, oh, if he gets mad, he says something, just ignore it. And
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I visited India like 1 year back, and even I heard that sort of things. I mean, like, I felt so bad. Like, I'm coming from Canada after a couple of years, and I mean, again, you are doing this, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
I
just
wish
wanted to quote the 2 3 points on that.
it's a very, very important point that you brought up, Kitty. And I wish my daughter could answer that question, because and I guess would just have so much to add to that. But um, as you were talking, I just thought of all the things that she has said to me. That on one hand, you know, he's her dad, and she feels, that yes, I love him. He's my father. But on the other hand, she remembers all the things that he did to me, and the way he treated me, and all the abuse that she saw, and she's like, he's not a good person. He's not somebody that I want to use as a role model or align myself with. And there's so much confusion in our head. And as she was growing up, when I left the marriage, she was 9 years old, and my younger one was 3. And as now, it's been 10 years, and it still continues to affect her, and it will forever. But when she was about 15, 16, the trauma of it all became so deep, and it was so overwhelming for her that she actually started to have a lot of mental health challenges. And it was a very tough time for us as a family. But through that, one of the big learnings that she had was that, it was never her fault, and it was never her responsibility. And it's okay to feel that duality. Like, yes, on one hand, I love him, he's my dad, but on the other hand, I'm not okay with the kind of person he is. And then she had to make a choice on, how much, if at all, do I want this person in my life. And I used to be that mom who would push my daughters to have a relationship with their father, because I thought, he's their dad, they deserve to have a dad in their life, and I don't want them to feel deprived of that, etc. And one day, my daughter asked me this question. She's like, Mom, if he was just a random person on the street with no relationship to us whatsoever, and he was just some random guy, with the kinds of views he has, the patriarchy, the misogyny, the attitudes towards women, the sexism, the homophobia, and all of those things, would you really want someone like that as a role model in my life? And I said, no, I wouldn't. And she's like, so there you go. I don't want him in my life. He's not good for me. Just because he's my dad, he doesn't get a free pass. And she made that decision for herself and for her own sanity and emotional and mental well-being, to really draw that firm boundary. They haven't cut him off, but he's like an acquaintance. Like, my kids will see him maybe once or twice a year. Sometimes months will go by, they have no contact, but he's not a part of their life. And I can relate to that confusion myself because I grew up with my dad being abusive to my mom. And at that time, I idolized my father. My father was a person who made me believe in all my dreams and goals and told me I'll be one day the top student at a top university. So I grew up almost thinking of my dad as a hero. But and then he died. Like he died when I was like in my marriage, and I was 23 when he passed away. And at that time he was supporting me to get out of my marriage, but then when he died I was sent back to my husband because my mom couldn't afford to take care of me at that time. So um, so I never really got a chance to reconcile those feelings myself. But while I was writing the book, and in that time, as I was recalling my childhood and writing about my childhood, and I recalled all these times that I remember my dad being abusive to my mother, and then I could so clearly see in the process of writing my book how the abuse that I saw as a kid became my normal, and it became the benchmark for my own marriage. And that's why I thought my marriage isn't so bad, because and I tolerated a lot of the abuse because that's what I thought was normal. That's what I learned was normal. And then I had all these feelings of anger towards my father, and I have no way of confronting him. He's passed, he's dead now. So I had all these conflicting, confusing emotions that then why did I idolize him? Why did I think he was such a hero? Why did I on one hand he empowered me, and on the other hand he treated my mother this way, that he abused her and he threw her out of the house, and he called her all these bad words, and he had these temper tantrums. And you know and I remember as a kid, I never whenever I reached home, I wouldn't know when I would go back home from school whether they will be all lovey-dovey with each other or they will be at each other's throats, and my dad will be throwing a fit, because that was how volatile and unpredictable the family situation was. So it's a very dysfunctional way to grow up in, and then you're used to that dysfunctionality, and then I normalize it in my own marriage. So when I saw that pattern so clearly, it invoked a lot of feelings of anger in my mind and in my heart, that I'm not okay with this. I don't know how to feel about him anymore. And then I had to reconcile with my own feelings. And it's a process. It took me a while. That the fact that I'm able to now sit here and talk about him this way, which I wasn't able to. I never wanted to admit that my father was a flawed man. So, or he was an abuser. So both those things can be true. So be kind to yourself. Of course it's confusing. He is your father, and there have been some wonderful moments when he's treated you really well, and there no person is completely black or white. Like when you read all these articles about abusers who are like, oh, he's a psychopath, he's a sociopath, like those are very, very small, minute fraction of the population. Like most abusers, most abusive men are people who are deeply, deeply flawed, and they have either unhealed trauma, or they've just deeply insecure. And that doesn't mean they're monsters, but they indulge in monstrous behaviors to deal with whatever is missing in themselves. And that's one of the reasons when I wrote about my husband and our ex-husband in my book, I made sure that I wrote about him with empathy, and I put the good parts in there, because that was what was so confusing for me. Like I see the good in him, but then he treats me this way. So how can he? What is he? Is he a good person? Is he a bad person? But these are people who have good and bad, like we all do, but they choose to act upon the bad, and it is very confusing. And especially when it's your dad, it's even double confusing, because you can't really divorce your dad and leave him. Like your dad is your dad. And I can understand that a lot now, because of I'm obviously supporting my daughter through her journey, and then also reconciling with my own feelings towards my father during the process of writing my book. So all I'll say in the end is that be kind to yourself. It's normal to feel the way you're feeling, and also know that you have the choice to draw boundaries. And boundaries doesn't mean you completely cut someone off, but at least realize that your health and emotional well-being comes first. So if that person's not good for you, whether it's your dad, make sure you draw a firm boundary and only allow him in to an extent where he doesn't damage your emotional and mental well-being. And that is absolutely first and foremost. You put yourself first. I've done the same with my mom. Like I love my mom and she's my mother, but she and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, and it becomes quite judgmental. And I've had to draw those boundaries. Yeah, doesn't mean I don't talk to her. I talk to her today. I talk to her like every few weeks, and right now I'm talking to her a little bit more frequently because of the COVID crisis. But she's not she's not an involved part of my life to an extent where I start feeling bad about myself and my life choices. So having those boundaries is extremely important, and don't try to justify the abuse, and don't try to think that you could have done something to make it better or to protect your mom. It was never on you. It was always on him, and the only person responsible for abuse is the abuser. And they are fully aware of what they're doing. They are fully aware of the of whatever they're inflicting. And yes, you could think, oh, that's all he knew, that's all he grew up with, or that's what his normal was, but that doesn't excuse treating somebody that way. And my daughter, my younger daughter, when she was 8, she once asked me that, Mom, if that was what Dad knew, that's the way he grew up, that's what his normal was, and he just didn't know any better, does that make him a bad person? And I said, absolutely. Yes, there was good in him, but when you're an adult, you have a choice. Um, just because you grew up a certain way, believing certain things and thinking those were okay, does not mean that you continue doing that going forward. When you're an adult, you're responsible for your own actions. So the only person responsible for abuse was the abuser, or is the abuser. It was never on your mom. It was never on you. And just be kind to yourself and her in the process, and feel empowered to draw those boundaries if necessary, because you come first. And we need to put ourselves first as women, and as human beings. I hope that helps. So I know we're at time. It's about 9:15. So it was really great to have you all. Thanks for coming in. I'm just going to quickly check the Q&A. Okay, there is one more question here from an anonymous attendee. Apologies, I came in a bit late, so I may have missed everyone's thoughts about how this mandated quarantine is affecting victims of domestic violence. Can anyone share what it might be like for a woman to live with her abuser under such conditions? What needs to be done to help them? If you know someone like this, are there any supports in place right now for victims who are living with their abusers? So thanks for that question and welcome. It's okay if you came in a bit late. No worries. I'm glad you came. I did share a little presentation in the beginning, and I will be sharing the video of that because I'm recording this session. So I'll put it up on YouTube and share on my social media. But I'll just give you a quick recap. So right now, because of the quarantine, I mentioned how isolation is an abuser's best friend. And right now that isolation is being handed to abusers on a silver platter because of the quarantine, and the woman does not have any kind of reprieve because she can't go to work or anywhere outside or see her friends and family. And most likely the abuser is not going away anywhere either because he's probably out of work or he's social distancing himself. So there's an abuser and a victim stuck in isolation where he's feeling extremely frustrated, and he's taking out his frustrations on the abuser and virtually using her as a punching bag. And it's really really a dire situation, and home becomes the most dangerous place for women who are living under such conditions. And if I know of someone like this, absolutely I do. For the past few weeks, so many women have been writing to me over social media about this and about how they can, where they can ask for help, who they can reach out to. Just last night, I was chatting with a woman on Twitter who was trying to find a place to go to, and she said she's called so many shelters around GTA and she couldn't find a spot because all shelters are full. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, whether that's affordable housing, virtual therapy, support networks like these, and just grassroots organizations and people just reaching out to women that they know in their friends and families and communities who are struggling and who could use that support, because no woman should feel that she's absolutely all alone and no one cares, because you're not alone. There are people who care. There are people who will help out, and we may not be able to help out in traditional methods like bringing someone in our home because of social distancing, but there are ways that we can help, and that's exactly what this group is about, is to think of those creative ways and to create a safe space for women to come and talk about these issues and feel supported. So are there any supports in place right now for victims who are living with their abusers? So There are supports. Thankfully, the government has put in quite a bit of money into the violence against women sector to deal with this problem during COVID. So we've got things like, shelters are looking for innovative ways to take on more people, such as partnering with hotels or Airbnb to house women if the shelters are too full. There are online counseling supports and things that are popping up. A lot of counseling services are turning to virtual sessions. My go-to has always been Assaulted Women's Helpline. You call them, you speak to someone, and they'll be able to direct you with resources in the community. So yes, there are supports, but there's a lot more that needs to be done and can be done. And one of the mandates for this session, and this will be every week, I'll be covering various topics and bringing in guests and talking about domestic violence and different supports that we can build into place, and just creating awareness and knowledge, because knowledge is power. And the more we can break down some of the myths and the uncertainties that women face, and that's why they are trapped, because they don't have the knowledge and awareness of their rights and of the support systems that are out there. The more we can break down those knowledge gaps, the easier it will be for women to stand up for themselves and create a life of respect. So I hope that answers your question. So all of you and everybody who's watching once I post this, if you have any questions, if you have any ideas, future sessions, things you'd like me to cover, guests you'd like me to bring in, please reach out to me. You can email me. It's samra@samrazafar.com. You can go to my website, samrazafar.com, and send me a message through my website. I'm very, very easily searchable on social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. You can send me messages through there. I'm on Instagram. You can send me a message through there. So there's lots and lots of ways of contacting me. I may not respond one-on-one right away, but I will make sure that I incorporate your questions and your thoughts and your ideas in these sessions. And the whole point of creating a dedicated group of sessions for domestic violence is because it's such a big problem. And right now we need all the support and awareness and knowledge that we can get. So thank you for everybody for joining in, and I will see you next week. And we'll be talking next week about emotional and psychological abuse, and what are some of the early signs to recognize it, and how we can create more self-care and reach out to resources early on, so that we don't feel like we have to stay for whatever reason, because abuse is never okay, and there's always a way, there's always a hope, and we're all in this together, and we will get out of this together. Thanks everyone for joining. Take care. Bye everyone.